Hey, everybody, and welcome back to another exciting episode of the Upper Cervical Corner. My name is Dr. Kramer, and for the last several weeks, we have slowly been working through this deductive reasoning process to really help you understand the approach of an upper cervical doctor, right? Working from really high level nervous system all the way down to the nitty gritty of what is a subluxation, or another word would be dis-ease. And so, what we are working on today is a massive summary. It is going to put this all together for you. It is a culmination of really what we've just gone through over the last several weeks to help you, the patient, really link this all together so that you can have a grasp of what we are attempting to do and how we can achieve that and help you as a piece of the puzzle to reveal the underlying cause of dis-ease and to enhance your natural adaptation processes to allow your nervous system to perform at its very best. And so today we are going to get rolling and get this thing going. Where's my screen share? Hold on one second here. On tying it all together. And so let's get in here and get this going. So putting it all together. So at the very beginning of this, we started with a very simple question. And that question that I asked is, what is your nervous system? And when I asked you this question, I had told you that you don't need to be embarrassed about this, because many times I have patients sit across from me in my office, and these are very, very smart people. And I ask them, like, hey, if I'm going to turn on Magic School Bus, we're going to watch Miss Frizzle, or we're going to turn on Schoolhouse Rock, and the subject is your nervous system, there are four parts that I need you to know. And they very rarely actually can answer all four parts. They want to get very complicated. People want to go into fight or flight, autonomic reflexes. They want to start talking about the vagus nerve, all these things. That's cool, but I think the simplicity is what makes this unique. Is that our nervous system as a unit is composed of our brain. You have your brain stem, you have your spinal cord, and you have nerves, right? And then this wonderful bundle right here is responsible for talking and controlling and organizing the human body. And in response, the human body is responsible for communicating back to the nervous system the status from conception till death, right? That's what it is supposed to do. And that process in the human body that we discussed is a process called adaptation, in which we are responsible for adapting, assimilating, ensuring our survival on both an internal and external level, right? And so, what we learned from that is that if we start to have a disruption in our adaptation, it means one of two things for us. There is a problem with our nervous system that is giving us a symptomatic presentation right from there. And then we also know that when adaptation is interrupted, it is a result of a structural deformity that has taken place in the system. And the question becomes, where is that at? We know that there are causes to this, and those causes are broken down into three phases, right? We have our trauma, which is the most obvious, and trauma comes in all shapes and sizes. And so many people think trauma is a car wreck, or they may think it's like a concussion. But I would tell you, if you subjected yourself to 15 years of a drug abusing spouse or an alcoholic, that's a trauma. Or let's say a child decides to go through some very serious stuff in life, that's trauma. Let's say watching kids get bullied, or maybe watching their spouse have an affair, or maybe it could be financial collapse or ruin. Those are all things that I would consider in the trauma side of things. You could have toxins, which are going to be environmental stressors. In today's day and age, this can go from as simple as the water you drink with the bioplastics, when you look at those forever plastics that attack you, the public drinking water system that's chock full of chemicals that are hormone disruptors, all the way down to pesticides, herbicides, anything in that area. Toxins can also be pharmaceutical agents. They can also be injections. They can be all types of things that are in the toxic realm. And the last one I'm going to put on here, we call it auto-suggestion, but it's going to be the psychological realm, right? And this is going to be what's going on with, your brain and how you engage people. If you live in an isolated state, if you're hiding out in your mom's basement on, Facebook 24/7 or playing Call of Duty, like we got some problems, right? And so we recognize that the nervous system, master system responsible for controlling the body, maintains a position that is called adaptation. Adaptation maintains the organ system from the internal and external environment responding to stressors. When we don't respond properly to those stressors, it means we have a problem with our nervous system and a problem with our structure. That is caused by an interruption of our nervous system function by one of three things, or a combination of all three: trauma, toxins, autosuggestion. This will generate for us the upper cervical understanding of what is the root cause of all, whoa, Dr. Kramer, come on now, root cause of all disease, right? And this is being a lack of normal function of organization of the human system. And those four parts that we look for when we are evaluating the integrity of the nervous system was an acronym we used called MOPI, right? And in that, it was structural. So it was the first two. And the last two were neurological, right? And so when we have all four parts of these present, it tells us that your symptomatic presentation or your interruption in your normal function of your human body is caused by an underlying problem located in the upper cervical spine, which is equal to the first C1 or C2, second bone of your neck. And when these two bones are misaligned, it will cause a thermographic reading of maladaptation or dyshyphonees. We know that if you are in a disordered state, you will have a graph that has repeatable squiggly lines. This tells us that you are not adapting. It tells us that you are having a problem with your nervous system. And it also tells us that there is a root cause problem that can be addressed. If you are in an adaptative state, you will have straight lines that look like this. And then it is the job of the upper cervical doctor to figure out if you live in this disordered bucket to how to help you get into this adaptative, cleared state so that you can maintain and sustain, and I'm going to put in here, health, right? And as I say this, health is a state of function, right? It's not a permanent state, but it is a transient state over time in which you adapt to stressors that you are subjected to. Sometimes those stressors overwhelm you and they create that disordered state. And then it's a simple process of applying an adjustment to creating the adaptative state. We know that when you are in that state of disorder, that you will have a problem with the first and second bone of your neck. And we talked about this from three different directions. We discussed that from a side view, we know that we should have a nominal value of one, your C1, which is called your atlas plane line, and then your C2 to C7, which is called a Cobb angle. We know ideal function is 18 to 22 degrees. We also know that ideal curvature is 20 to 35 degrees. We also discussed that if you have a front to back view of the spine, and we are looking at C1 and C2, and we are looking at the right and left half, if we take the measurement of the C1 and C2 in relation to your skull, right, these and the directions that they're going, we know that if we have a greater number on one side and a lesser number on the other, and if we subtract the difference, so let's reset our equation. So this is actually going to be a greater minus lesser. You need to have a value that is less than 0.3 millimeters between two for a stable upper cervical spine. When it is greater, it relates to a problem of a misalignment of C1 and C2. The last view we discussed with you last week was this idea of a base posterior, where we look at your C1 and how it is in relation to your skull. And we know this should be a 90-degree angulation. And so from that, what we created and what we have done for you and what we have learned over the last few weeks of this whole entire thing to wrap this up, to give you this massive idea, is that a majority of human illness that is coming into your body is done for one of three reasons. You have a problem with the trauma, you have a problem with toxic exposure, or you have a psychological issue going on, right? We can look at those three things. From that, we know that those can overwhelm your nervous system. And when your nervous system becomes overwhelmed and it goes into dysfunctional mode, we have a problem that we call ease. That means that you are lacking normal nervous system function. When we have disease, the upper cervical practice is looking for something that is called a subluxation. Subluxation is measured in 4 parts. The 4 parts that we discussed on this are going to be the malposition of a bone, which we just went over. It's going to be the occlusion of a hole. Woo, occlusion of hole, right? It's going to be the pressure on the nervous system. And it's going to be interference to the natural function of the human body, right? Those are our big 4 that we look for. We also recognize that each one of these has a responsible test to take care of it. This one is measured with thermography. This one is measured with X-ray or CT, depending upon what state you are in. Then what our job is that when we find a positive thermographic graph that shows us that you are in a non-adaptive state, we need to take a series of X-rays that will show us really the structural problems. And we figure out what the structural issue is. We know that if we work backwards and we address the structural issue, that will take this graph and turn it into 3 straight lines. We know when we have 3 straight lines that we will nullify all 4 positions of this. When all 4 positions of that are nullified, it will eliminate disease, it will upregulate nervous system function, and it will unwind this whole entire system to restore for you the wonderful condition. Let me move this thing out of the way. I don't know what I'm doing here. Whoa. And that will restore for you the wonderful condition that you have been asking for from every single person in the medical community called health. The problem is that we have always looked from the outside in. And I will tell you that you don't have vertigo because you lack meclizine. You don't have diabetes because you lack some form of a, upregulation of glucose or a glucose inhibitor, right, of some type, right? What's the latest? Ozempic, right? You don't have diabetes because your body doesn't make Ozempic, right? You don't have headaches because you lack Tylenol. You don't have trigeminal neuralgia because you lack Botox. All of these things are conditions that are simply a symptom of an underlying problem. And we know that when you have a disorganized neurological state that is manifesting a structural change in the dysregulated area, that when you restore nervous system function by providing the right adjustment at the right time, at the right place, you will restore the process that we all desire that is called health. And over time, you will have what we would call, let me go down here for you, a process of positive survival values. Now, this doesn't mean that you're going to magically be sustaining health for a long period of time, right? This doesn't mean that you can all of a sudden just undo all your processes, go eat McDonald's and go, binge milkshakes for the rest of your life, because that's just going to lead you back down to the disease pathway. This simply opens the conversation for saying to us, after I restore normal for my nervous system, what do I need to do to support that system, the dynamic function of body? And that, my friends, is where we are going next. Our next conversation, our next step, our next series of videos are going to be answering the question that is asked all the time in chiropractic offices across the world, especially upper cervical. And that question is this: how do I hold my adjustment? Question number 1, right? Question number 2 is, what else can I do? These 2 questions are loaded. These 2 questions are outside the realm of chiropractic, because chiropractic is about addressing the nervous system and giving the correct adjustment at the right time in the right place. However, once we sustain that adjustment, we do have to address the big 3: trauma, toxic, psychological presentations. And that, my friends, is what we'll cover starting next week. Listen, if you have any questions, if this idea doesn't make sense to you, comment below, reach out to the office, ask us as much as you can so that we can make sure that we clearly communicate what the premise of upper cervical care is. Because remember, everything starts with this wonderful question: what is the nervous system? And if you can answer that for me, you can rationally understand why we would do what we do and how we would achieve the results we achieve, and why chiropractic miracles would take place every day by respecting human physiology and understanding the power of an upper cervical adjustment. That, my friends, is all I got for the sides of chiropractic.